Fed Chair Janet Yellen under fire during her second day testifying on Capitol Hill. Republican Congressman Scott Garrett accusing the Fed of acting and making decisions clearly on a partisan political basis, adding that Yellen's calendar is guided by partisan politics.
I'm sorry, we meet with a wide range of groups. I think it is a complete mischaracterization of our meeting schedules, and my meetings are entirely public. My schedule is completely in the public domain.
Well, that's where I'm actually taking this from. This was just handed to me, so it's good that that this much of it is in public domain, because all we're trying to do is make a little bit more in the public domain.
These are private one-on-one meetings, and I don't think it's appropriate. If I had breakfast with you, I would not make a transcript of what we discussed over breakfast.
Joining us right now is Congressman Scott Garrett. He's a member of the Financial Services Committee. And sir, go ahead and lay out for us what you think is happening here.
So I think whether you're talking specifically about the street or the American public in general, what they're looking for from the Fed is a little bit more both certainty and also transparency in their actions, both on the monetary side, but also on their side dealing with their huge new powers that they have under Dodd-Frank as their regulatory side as well. And that's all really Congress is looking for here. And what the little clips that you have here is talking about is this myth that's been out there that they've been promulgated for years or decades that the Fed is some totally independent of partisan politics entirely, and for that reason they should not be held accountable on either front, on the monetary side or the regulatory side. And I think that is just a myth.
Although, Congressman, I have to say, Chair Yellen sounded very reasonable in her responses that we just listened to on this. I don't think we'd necessarily see a transcript of every breakfast that she ever came to.
And we were not looking for a transcript for everyone. So I don't know how reasonable she was when she responded back by saying that no, we're not going to give you a transcript. But what we were saying is that there is a evidence of partisan interplay with regard to the Fed, and all you have to do is just look back over the years. And I think I laid out a half a dozen or over a half a dozen examples of where politics and partisanship plays into it, not only by Chair Yellen, but by her predecessor as well. And when that partisanship plays in, and when you see that there's a lack of independence by the Fed, then all that argument goes off the table. And all we really want the Fed to act as is to be open and provide some sort of certainty that we see from any other federal agency as far as openness and transparency. That's the legislation that's supposed to the House and Senate.
The Fed looks pristine compared to the FCC, my friend.
Well, so I'm not sure in what sense you're saying they look pristine as far as you have a
if you want to talk about someone that looks like they're folding to political pressure and partisan interests, the FCC's decision on net neutrality looks like they listened to what the president said and they took notes of what he wanted and just wrote the rules based on what the White House wanted. You'll never see that from the Fed. So I mean, maybe.
Well, you're sure you see that from the Fed? Well, that was one of my examples when I said they can't. But under the last election, what was the partisan issue that they were talking about, and that was income inequality. And just about a week before the election, you had the Fed chair going out there talking about income inequality. When was the last time you heard the Fed talking about that issue?
That's not necessarily proof that Janet Yellen did that because it wasn't her own idea to come up with it. The proof that you use for this is you say that they visited the White House. She visited the White House 51 times, 25 times to visit the Secretary of the Treasury. What's wrong with that?
Right, and you make a good point, that if there was only one example here or one example there, then it would just be pure coincidence. But when you go through the entire list of their activities, both by her in the past, then you have to think that it's a little bit more. When you had the former chair coming out, Bernanke, you've seen Bernanke come before our committees, and we've often said, Chairman Bernanke, can you tell us your opinion on this piece of legislation or that piece of legislation? What does he always say? No, the Fed, we're independent. We don't get involved. Well, except, of course, when the president had his spending program of last term, and the president was pushing that, and at that time, Bernanke came out and says, great plan, the stimulus program that's going to turn the economy around. I'm right behind the president. And oh yeah, that was right before Bernanke was up for...
That may have been something he was hoping to get more off the Fed's plate and more back into the Washington legislators and administration's plate. I know that's been a huge complaint from the Fed that they've had to carry the water when other institutions didn't get their act together.
We can hope a whole bunch of things, but I think these all together show that the independence of the Fed is a myth, and all we're asking for is some degree of accountability and transparency, both in the area of guidance, monetary policy, and also on regulation front as well.
All right. Well, Congressman, thank you for joining us today. We'd love to see you when you're back in the district and back here on set with us, too.
All the time. Thanks.
Okay.